actually wanted to tie these two events together because Jesus talked about the days of Lot, and he also talked about earthquakes and, and phenomena in the sky and things like this. As a younger person, I mean, I never thought that I'd get this old. I always thought I'd die young, but for some reason I'm still here. But anyway, how do you see this, and looking forward to the rest of your life? You're seeing the vast increase of homosexuality, and you're seeing more and more of phenomena happening in the earth. Who wants to go first? James?
Well, for me, it's a reaction to the fact that you have a very, very militant feminism going on today, where men are giving up on women because it's like a devil's choice at this point. Either
Magto, yes, Magto. It's called Magto, isn't it? Men going their own way.
Yeah.
Men going there, yeah.
Sure. But yeah, there's really no explaining it other than that everything has a reaction, and the fact that women are now competing with men in the workplace, and they're giving up some of the fundamentals of being a woman, which is to be a person that is nurturing, to educate children. And you can see that with the children today. The children don't have nurturing mothers. They have mothers that, for the large part, have to work. So who do they give the nurturing to? The public schools. And what do the public schools indoctrinate children with? You can choose your gender. So it's no surprise that what used to be like a small minority is continually growing, constantly growing, because we celebrate that. We don't celebrate family values. We don't celebrate traditional family. We celebrate the outliers. The outliers of society are the celebrity.
Yes.
All right, Davey, you want to pick up and see?
Yep. Well, yeah, I'll address the two issues separately. I guess first, like 15 years ago, I guess I never, ever, ever thought I'd see the day where people would be denying basic biology, that God created a male and female. I never thought we'd ever reach that point where you'd have like 100, 200 plus genders, where people could just choose their gender at will, where people would deny basically male and female on birth certificates and stuff like that. That wasn't something I never, ever envisioned. So that was the one thing that really took me by surprise. We were always kind of aware of the rise of homosexuality and lesbianism, all that sort of thing, that we kind of expected. But this suddenly, there's no longer male and female. You can be fish gender, frog gender, and the fact that it's taught and promoted in schools, and this is what's presented as normal, that I never thought we'd see the day. Just going back to Disney too, Disney is suffering harm. They're losing subscribers, they're tanking, they've had to lay off over 7,000 workers. And for anyone who had doubts where the Disney company was heading, this gay choir thing, where they're actually going to take the old songs too from, like the Disney I grew up with and remember, things like, Snow White and Pinocchio. They're actually going to take the songs from that and do gay versions of them at this concert too. So they're going to pervert the old stuff as well as just bring out new perversion. But of all the people who lost their jobs, those two wicked women who were pushing this and promoting this, Carrie Burke and Latoya Ravenel, they're still in their jobs. They're still pushing this and they're going for it. The other thing is the earthquakes and natural disasters. I guess that's something I guess I've always seen prophetically of importance, and I always thought it was going to ratchet up and keep getting progressively worse and worse, and I really don't think we've seen anything yet. What I didn't count on was the invention of the climate change god. And years ago, back like even back in the 80s, people would used to mock religion. It's, oh, you know, they're the guys that throw people into the volcano, you know, to please the volcano god, to stop the volcano from rumbling, you know, you throw someone in. And now we've basically got that on a worldwide scale where people are sacrificing lives, people's lives, for the sake of pleasing the climate god. You know, this whole climate change, it's become a religion. And it's just as stupid as, you know, years ago, these people would have mocked religion as, oh, you're those superstitious ones who throw people into the volcanoes. Well, now they're justifying mass depopulation, all in the name of climate change.
Yes.
So that's, yeah, something else I never kind of, you know, thought of.
And all this stuff is happening faster and faster and faster. I remember the first Earth Day from the 70s when they all told us that it was going to get so cold that the people in the United States were going to have to move to Mexico because otherwise we'd be froze to death. Well, and they said 10 years. And then after 10 years, 80, it says it's going to get too hot, you know, and then, you know, they keep constantly making these predictions. But, you know, when I see the things that the world is doing and the people at the World Economic Forum and all their plans for depopulation and everything, I understand the cup of wrath is filling up and the earth is ready to vomit us out, you know, and, you know, and I was reading Ezekiel the other day where Ezekiel, through the Lord, ties in the correction of the Jewish people by removing them from the land, but he also ties it into the judgment on that he was going to pour out on the other nations. So he gets his people out, and then what he does is he purifies the land, and by removing them all, and then he brings judgment on the foreign nations. So I think when I start understanding how God is going to be coming back to destroy those that are destroying the earth, and we're seeing this through all these things. And we'll, like I said, we'll talk about the Ohio thing when we get back there, but we're doing so much wrong to this earth. And, you know, I'm looking over here in the South, I'm seeing evergreen trees just brown everywhere. And, you know, some people are saying it's coming because of the things they're spraying in the sky. And some people say it's some sort of beetle. But yet when they cut the trees down and they look at the trees, they can't find no beetles. But, you know, another mystery. But trees everywhere. My neighbor's got like 10 trees, and across the street, 10 trees. And all down these beautiful parkways, they're dying everywhere. So anyway, so our earth is changing and Jesus is coming soon.
May I add to the comments of James and of David?
Sure, of course. Of course.
Concerning what James said, he's absolutely correct, but there is another major factor. Any objective statistical analysis will show that children, that boys particularly, not having a father, or more predisposed not only to dropping out of school, winding up in the criminal justice system, but they also statistically more prone to the lack of a male father image to becoming homosexuals. The divorce rate and the rate of children born out of wedlock is also a sociologically driving force in the increase in the number of homosexuals we see. Sin begets sin. So I affirm everything that James said, but I do think the divorce rate is another, and the children being born out of wedlock, which is particularly crippling and tragic in the minority and especially Black American community. It's something that Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the senator from New York, who was a Kennedy Democrat, warned was going to happen in the 1960s if it wasn't corrected. Well, it wasn't corrected, and here it is. Concerning what Davey said, that LaToya woman at Disney, I watched a film clip of what she did, denigrating Abraham Lincoln and all of this stuff, and pushing Juneteenth, but she was just lying. She was, the narrative aimed at indoctrinating children was pure revisionism, rewritten history, half truth. And she admits that she's pushing the homosexual agenda on kids. She admits it. May God do something to stop Disney.
Yep.
That woman is absolutely wicked. Thirdly, I'd like to just talk of something very briefly, of my own background, which you guys generally know. After the hippie era happened, and there was no revolution, and rock music became commercialized, and the Beatles broke up, and the Fillmore East closed down, and rah-rahs or the nerds grew long hair and stuff like that, and pot smoking became no longer a secret underground thing. I was somebody who moved to the next level of rebellion, the underground world of New York, where I got into you'd call it, it was truly an underground movement. And its patriarch was the artist from Pittsburgh, Andy Warhol, but he lived in New York. Now, I'd been at parties with Andy Warhol and I saw him around, but I didn't really know him. But I do know people who did know him. But I was into this thing of after hours clubs. And when everybody had been singing in the 60s, the Jefferson Airplane and Bob Dylan, the times they are changing and all this kind of stuff, and Flower Power, there was this rock band in New York led by Lou Reed and John Cale called the Velvet Underground. And they were singing about junkies and transvestites and things like this. Now, Andy Warhol produced their first record. And he said Andy Warhol, as a pop artist, was really a sociologist who used pop art, instead of a typewriter. He was really a prognosticator. He saw the way society was going. And he said, forget about this love and peace stuff. You're going to have a time where there's not going to be any meaning. And he would paint these silk screen pictures of Marilyn Monroe or himself or somebody just with this kind of stare. And he was very clever what he did with 16 millimeter film. And he said it's going to be just consumerism. And he would paint Campbell soup cans and sell them for lots of money. But he also said that this homosexuality and transvestitism and things like this were going to become socially normative. And then the Velvet Underground was singing about this, that there would be a mainstreaming of sadomasochism and things like this, and of opioid, of morphine-based drug addiction, and it would become culturally normative. Well, just like Bob Dylan said, the times are changing. The Velvet Underground and Andy Warhol said the times are changing. All this stuff they said, now you see it with the fentanyl. Now you see it with these transvestites having little kids sit on their laps and read them stories in school at the taxpayer's expense. This stuff that Warhol saw coming is what happened. There were social prognosticators about what happened in the 60s, and then there were social prognosticators in the 70s. Fortunately, I became a Christian, but I was in that scene. I had friends who were drag queens, who were transvestites. I was attracted to it because it was still underground. It was the next order of rebellion against the establishment, because the hippie thing didn't happen, really. So that is the way it went. And, this stuff has come upon us. But I remember people in the 1970s saying that this was going to happen. Even the world knew what was going to happen. Then I got saved and I read The Vision by David Wilkerson. And he said this stuff was going to happen. And it happened. The only thing that has surprised me personally is the pace at which it's happened.
Yeah.